Running for office shouldn't require a flak jacket. I'm Michael Smerconish from the Philly Burbs. On Monday, I spoke at a gathering of the National Conference of State Legislatures. It was in a packed convention center in Boston. According to the NCSL, it was the largest gathering of elected state legislators ever. The opening session focused on civility in crisis. It was bipartisan. It was moving. Minnesota's state legislative leaders, Senate Majority Leader Erin Murphy, a Democrat, and House Leader Lisa DeMuth, a Republican, they spoke in tribute to Speaker Emerita Lisa Hortman, who was assassinated along with her husband Mark on June 14. In a separate but related attack, Senator John Hoffman was shot 9 times. The attack also left his wife Yvette wounded. In his first public remarks since the shooting, Hoffman spoke to the assembled thousands by videotape. And part of what he said is this.
Terror in the night isn't legislative reform, man. It's repulsive. Showing up at somebody's door in the dark, pounding, screaming with a gun, impersonating law enforcement is not a strategy for positive change. It's intimidation. It's violence. And it has no place in a healthy democracy. You know, we can never make sense of the actions of a sociopath, but we can choose to reject it, and we can govern. We can govern. That's what we are elected to do.
After the video, I led a fireside chat with Wisconsin House Speaker Robin Vos, focused on the rise of political division in America. When Speaker Vos asked me how we got here, I said, we're living in the midst of a mental health crisis, that we've become too fragmented of a society, that the internet has fueled our disconnect, powered polarization, harmed the well-being of our kids. I cited gerrymandering, self-sorting, and the lack of campaign finance reform, among other factors, and I said that we've normalized political violence. I said what we lack the most today is shared common experience. And when we finished, on stage walked Gabby Giffords, herself no stranger to political violence. In 2011, she was shot in the head while doing constituent outreach in Arizona. A gunman that day killed 6 people and wounded 12 others. Not lost on me was that this Boston event occurred 1 week to the day that a gunman in New York City walked into a prestigious Park Avenue office tower and killed 4 in cold blood. And 2 days after this Boston gathering, 5 Army soldiers were injured at Fort Stewart in Georgia by an active duty sergeant. That we live in dangerous times, that's sad, not a surprise by now. But less obvious is the impact on the willingness of people to serve. Consider this quote: "Safety shouldn't be a deterrent for people who want to run for elective office." Gretchen Shirley said that to Barbara Rodriguez, a reporter for the 19th. That's an independent nonprofit newsroom. Shirley herself lost a congressional bid in 2018, then helped change federal policy to allow candidates to use campaign funds for childcare. And now she's advocating for campaign funds to be used for security measures. This week, the Vote Mama Foundation, in which she's involved, released a report documenting the rise in federal candidate security spending. An FEC rule in 2024 opened the door for the reasonable costs of security for federal candidates. Think alarms and alarm lock systems and gates and personnel. But many states lag behind. North Dakota recently became just the 10th state to allow campaign funds to be spent on candidate safety. Robert Pape is a political scientist at the University of Chicago. He's been studying political violence for 3 decades. He's going to join me in just a moment. But in June, he wrote for the New York Times, and Pape noted that just within the last 5 years, we've seen 2 assassination attempts against President Trump, the brutal attack on then-Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, an assassination plot against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, the January 6th assault on the Capitol, riots after the murder of George Floyd, potentially deadly arson against Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, attacks on Tesla dealerships, and the killing of 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, D.C. And by the way, that's not a complete list. According to Pape, today's political violence is occurring across the political spectrum, and there's a corresponding rise in public support for it on both the right and the left. And the targets of such violence are found at all levels. At Princeton University, the Bridging Divides initiative tracks hostility against local officials in the United States. They maintain a threats and harassment data set It's a longitudinal event-based data track on the rate, frequency, types, and targets of threats and harassment faced by a wide range of local officials around the country, from elected officials at the municipal, county, township level to appointed officials and election workers. In June, the most recent month for which data is available, they report a 40% increase of 40 incidents from the previous 2 months. In total, more than 250 incidents have been reported in the first half of 2025, up 9% from the same period in 2024. The Princeton research, it gets very granular in its detail. It categorizes hostility by issue type. Another example of the localized nature of political violence and hostility. In July, Bridging Divides released an analysis titled Mitigating Threats Against School Board Officials. The report noted that nearly 80,000 individuals serve on school boards around the country, and that these frequently unpaid community members have seen an upsurge in hostility, often fueled by the national political environment. These threats, they spill over into their personal lives. They undermine their ability to carry out their work safely. It all makes me wonder, if we can't protect the safety of our public servants, who'll be willing to serve? Who'll be willing to run for office? Probably only the extremists. And as for what to do about all this, Robert Pape says, my research suggests that to de-escalate the political environment and reduce the risk of violence, America's political leaders need to cross their political divides and make joint statements, and ideally joint appearances, that denounce all political violence, welcome peaceful protest, and call for respecting the rules, process, and results of free and fair elections in the country. It all makes sense, but I think it's going to be a challenge. According to the FBI, crime was down in every category in 2024. And yet, public disruption has been normalized, especially by the events of January 6 and President Trump's subsequent pardoning of the offenders. His supporters see his 4 indictments as the equivalent. The solution lies in zero tolerance by all sides of the political spectrum in violent rhetoric and violent conduct, backed up by aggressive law enforcement and prosecution. That seems unlikely as long as Trump is president. I'm not blaming him for everything. It's just a fact. The message from Boston was clear. Democracy should not be a contact sport, and public service shouldn't require Kevlar. If we want good people to step forward, we have to make sure that they can serve without fearing for their lives. I want to know what you think. Go to my website at Smerconish.com. Answer today's poll question: is the risk of violence a sufficient reason to not run for office? Joining me now is University of Chicago professor Robert Pape. He's also the director of the Chicago Project on Security and Threats. Professor, nice to have you back. You heard my explanation as to how we got here: a witch's brew of a mental health crisis, fragmentation of society, polarized media, gerrymandering, self-sorting, lack of campaign finance reform. What am I missing?
You're missing the deeper social changes that are happening in our country, Michael, that are adding the real fuel to the fire. We're going through in our country 2 historic changes at the same time. For the last 20 years, we've been going through a major demographic shift, where we're shifting from a white majority democracy to a white minority, more racially balanced population. We're also shifting to a high degree of economic inequality at the same time. We have shifted huge portions of our national wealth from the bottom 90% of the country to the top 1%. We live, most of us, in a negative sum society. You put those 2 big social changes together, this is a recipe for political violence. It's a recipe for fragile politics, polarization. All those issues you talked about are made fantastically worse by these social changes. And this is why we've got to take this very seriously. For the last 5 years, the violence, the political violence, is getting worse as normal crime is coming down. These social changes will be with us for years. So that's why it's crucial that we take steps now to do more to push back on the growing political violence in our country.
I quoted from your essay from June in the Times where you spoke to solutions. Amplify on what you wrote. What can we do about this? I'm alarmed. The people in Boston were alarmed. I think the nation is alarmed.
So the people in Boston are taking a page right out of the op-ed I wrote in the New York Times. I called for leaders from both parties to come together. But we need this to become more of a national event, not simply an event that you're reporting on very usefully here today. So, for example, imagine if you have the survivors of the political violent attacks. You have Brett Kavanaugh, you have Pelosi, you have Steve Scalise, you have Josh Shapiro coming to a single national event. Hosted, say, by a major university, University of Chicago, also with a major prominent figure like yourself. Now we could command national attention for that event. This would not just be an event that's happening under the radar, and this is how you stand together against political violence. And why do this? It's because our surveys show that 70+% of the public on both sides of the aisle abhor political violence. They understand this is a race to the bottom. What we need to do is galvanize that 70+% that abhor political violence and literally change the incentive structure for politicians around the country.
So please extend those invitations. I'd be honored to participate. And a final thought from me and a quick response from you. I think there's something we can all be doing in our local communities, and that is to imitate, to emulate our parents. Our parents were joiners. Our parents were active in their communities. Our parents were involved among their neighbors. And when, Professor, there's shared common experience, I think some of the perception of divide dissipates. So I'm here to say that there's something each and every one of us can be doing at home in our neighborhoods. Final thought is yours. You have 30 seconds.
We need to have the phrase, "It is not okay." Stand together against political violence.
Professor, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate all your good work.
And thank you for
what are your thoughts?
Hit
me up on... Thank you, sir. Hit me up on social media. I'll read some responses throughout the course of the program. I don't think violence, although I do think the smear campaigns would be a deterrent, I don't think violence, although I do think the smear campaigns would be a deterrent. Who needs it? Jim's responding to today's poll question at Smerconish.com. Because as I'm reflecting on all these trends and all these events and all of this data and the experience that I had surrounded by literally thousands of elected state legislators on Monday, I find myself saying, who's going to step forward and serve in this climate of violence? And by the way, I'm not playing whataboutism at all today. So spare me those social media responses. This exists at both ends of the political spectrum, and I have to believe that there are good folks out there who say, hey, I'm interested in running for township supervisor. I'd be willing to serve as one of the 80,000 school board members across the country, but who needs it? And why would I subject myself to the risk of hostility and potential violence? That's what I'm asking in today's poll question. Is the risk of violence a sufficient reason to not run for office? I know it's an unusual question. Go vote. I can't wait to see the result. Up ahead, the president is escalating the redistricting war with calls for a new census. He doesn't want undocumented immigrants included. I'm going to talk to David Wasserman of the nonpartisan Cook Political Report about the latest battle lines. No one knows the subject like David. And don't forget, sign up for the newsletter at Smerconish.com. When you're voting on the poll question, you'll get the work of award-winning illustrators like Rob Rogers.